radical. Fundamental principles of freedom, rational self-interest, and individual rights. This is the Yaron Brook Show.
All right, everybody, welcome to Yaron Brook Show on this Monday, October 30th, day before Halloween. Hope everybody's having a great beginning of your week, and looking forward to the rest of the week. This will be the last show from Europe, and I expect to be back in Puerto Rico on Thursday, doing a show in the morning, a show in the evening, back to kind of our regular news roundup and Yaron Brook Show schedules. There'll be some deviation because I will be traveling again next week, but other than that, hopefully we can stick to something regular as we move into the future. Just to remind everybody, you can ask questions, make comments, make suggestions, and get them highlighted by using the Super Chat feature. Please do. It's a way to support the show. You can also do stickers. You can any which way you can, or if you're watching the show after the fact, you can applaud the show and make a contribution, or you can support the show monthly on yaronbrookshow.com/support or on Patreon or Subscribestar. I fixed the internet. Don't ask me how. Found the glitch, fixed it, did away with it, and now we're streaming again and back to normal. All right, today I'm going to give like a quick update on what is going on in Israel, some headlines, some key events that happened over the last 24, 48 hours. I want to talk about Iran today. A couple of stories out of Iran that have nothing to do with the war directly, but I think are important. And then we will talk about my experience today in day one of the Alliance for, Alliance for Responsible Citizenship Conference. This is Jordan Peterson's organization. At his conference, I was there today, and I'll give you a report on day one of the conference. It'll probably be the only day I'll give you a report on, because I'm certainly not attending the third day, and I probably won't attend the second day. All right, let's see. So let's start with, we will start with the update from Israel, from Gaza, and then move on. So, a few highlights. Again, we've done a lot on this, and we've analyzed it in great depth, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on a lot of these issues. But just strategically, Israel is engaged in operations inside the West Bank with ground forces, with tanks, and ground troops. But a few days ago, they entered the Gaza Strip from the north. What happened, I think, over the last 24 hours is that military personnel has entered the Gaza Strip kind of in the middle, just south of Gaza City. And what they're trying to do is basically cut Gaza off into two. They're going to separate the south of Gaza from the north. Now, remember, this is about a 25-kilometer stretch, and they're going to cut it into two. I'm not sure if it's half. I don't know it's about half. And the south is where they want the civilians to go. The south is they're leaving. They're much more using precision rockets over there. They're being much more careful in what they bomb. They're basically asking all the civilians to go there. That's where humanitarian aid is being supplied from Egypt. And Israel just agreed last night to increase the humanitarian aid significantly, so there'll probably be 100 trucks a day of humanitarian aid coming in, just to make sure that the poor Palestinians don't starve. And they'll keep the south segregated that way. Of course, there are tunnels underneath, so now we'll talk about tunnels in a minute. So they're going to split the Gaza Strip into two. That's the goal, at least. That's what they're trying to do today, in the next couple of days, I think. Then my expectation is that they'll try to figure out where the tunnels are exactly, and they'll start blocking the tunnels. That is, they'll separate the south from the north tunnel-wise. I'm not sure exactly how they will deal with the tunnels in the south, where I think Hezbollah has probably put most of its forces, because there they are protected by civilians. There they can use a human shield. But what the IDF will probably do is block those tunnels and then start moving north and just wipe them out as they go along, and destroy the tunnel system, destroy the ammunitions in it, and hopefully find some hostages, and do whatever they can to destroy whatever infrastructure and whatever personnel Hamas has in the northern Gaza Strip, whatever they have left. Remember, Israel's been bombing the northern Gaza Strip every day, hundreds of missiles. It is surprising there's anything standing there. Still, it just suggests, to me at least, that they're being super precise and super careful not to hurt civilians, and inflicting as little damage on even the northern part of Gaza, which they've asked the Palestinians over and over and over and over and over to evacuate. They're still being incredibly cautious in how they bomb it, to their own detriment. It just means that the resistance for Hamas will be much stronger as the ground forces move in. So far, as far as I can tell, and we're in the fog of war, we don't really know what's going on the ground. We don't know how well they're advancing. We don't know what the casualty counts are. But so far it seems like the casualties are relatively small or relatively low. I will say this: there was a report. This is kind of just an interesting point of fact that tells you a little bit about kind of the Israeli military. But there was a notification about a couple of soldiers that had been killed. Well, one soldier that was killed October 25th, that's the latest data that we have, that's 5 days ago. And then another soldier was killed October 10th, which is right after everything started. And what's interesting about this is the first is a Lieutenant Colonel Maidan Israel, 35, head of supply in the Southern Command. And the second is Major Yair Zloof, 32, commander of the 401st Armored Brigade Surgical Company. What is striking about this is how senior these people are. And this is fairly typical of the Israeli military. Senior commanders are at the front. Senior commanders are at the front line fighting with the soldiers. They're the first guys to rush. They're the first guys, in this case, commander of a surgical company. He was there with his men on the front line. That is kind of in the DNA of the Israeli military, and I wouldn't be surprised, and you'll see this, in the Entebbe raid, which was the raid in 1977, I think, where the Israeli Special Forces freed the hostages in Entebbe of a hijacked airplane. The only casualty, there was one casualty, and the only casualty was the commander of Special Forces in Israel, the commander of Sayeret Matkal, which is the unit that executed the raid. He was shot by a sniper. He was the only casualty in the whole thing. By the way, it was Bibi Netanyahu's brother, Yoni Netanyahu, a real hero. Actually, he was the one who read Atlas Shrugged and gave Bibi Netanyahu Atlas Shrugged. Anyway, he was a real hero. But that's often the case in the Israeli military, is that it is the commanders who, because they're on the front line, they lead their troops on the ground. I think a feature of free countries. You don't see this in authoritarian countries anywhere near as much. All right, some other news. So Israel overnight managed to free one of the hostages. It's not clear how they did it, but one of the units that was on the ground in Gaza freed a private, Ori Megidish. It's a woman. She was in the army, a private in the army. She was taken hostage, and she was freed. You can just imagine the relief and the happiness, just the joy of her family to see her back. I think an important, really, really important. And we don't know whether this is an indication of their ability to free other hostages. We will see. No information has been revealed in terms of how they did it, where they found her, was there a battle, what exactly was involved. We don't know yet. We also don't know if they also found any hostages were dead. We're likely to hear. We're probably going to hear that later. They'll first tell us about the ones who are alive. They'll have to tell the family first, and everything else. And everything else. Tragically, if you remember, there was a infamous picture of a girl lying in the back of one of these monsters' vehicles. She was naked, or pretty much naked. Her leg looked like it was all broken up. She appeared dead. She was taken back to the Gaza Strip. She was then dragged through the streets where people were cheering and poking her. And I mean, she was already dead, luckily for her, I guess. Anyway, it was a German girl, and there was some rumors that she might be alive, because when they were dragging her through the streets in Gaza, some people thought, hoped, prayed that she was alive. Her name was Shani Louk, L-O-U-K. A pretty girl, young, I think she was a model. She was at this festival, and she was obviously raped and tortured, and it's just horrible. Anyway, the IDF, in the same raid, as far as I can tell anyway, found remains of the girl. They found a remain of her skull. It's hard to talk about this stuff, but it looks like she was decapitated. It looks like she was decapitated after she was dead, while they were playing around with her body, abusing her body. Just the horror of it. They decapitated her, and a piece of her skull they've done DNA tests. They've confirmed it is indeed her, and she is dead. I really, really hope that she died early, that she didn't have to experience all that herself. Let me just see. All right. By the way, at Yale University, students are denying any of this happened. There is, there is. At the bottom of an article about what happened in Israel, there was an editor's note with a correction as of October 25th. This is the Yale Daily News. Yale University, a university that produces most of our presidents in recent times, one of the great universities of America, or Ivy League. Anyway, the editor's notes correction, October 25th. Quote, this column has been edited to remove unsubstantiated claims that Hamas raped women and beheaded men. True, they beheaded women and children as well as men. Unsubstantiated claims. Yale student newspaper. I don't know how Yale student newspaper ever recovers for something like this. But truly horrific, more of kind of what's going on with regard to this. So the state of universities continues to deteriorate. The Ayn Rand Institute published an op-ed in the Orange County newspaper. You can find it online. You can find it on the Ayn Rand Institute. Excellent op-ed about the state of our universities, why donors should stop giving the universities money, complimenting the donors who have already done so, but illustrating that the rot at the universities is far deeper than what these donors suggest. This is not just about Israel. It goes much deeper than that, and university donors should go gult, should stop funding their destroyers. I've been saying this. The Institute has been saying this. Ayn Rand said this in a final speech. The one thing you can do to help the culture is stop giving money to your alma mater. You are funding the enemy. Anyway, great op-ed by Ankar Gate and Ilan Journo in today's Orange County Register. A couple of other things at the periphery of what's going on that I want to highlight. The head of the Mossad, the Israeli Mossad, the equivalent of the CIA, it turns out, there's substantiated reports that he was just in Qatar negotiating with the Qataris and probably with Hamas to release hostages. There's no words in which I can express the outrage that I feel towards something like this. I mean, the fact that Israel would go to Qatar, the fact that they would negotiate with these monsters, sanction their existence. Where's that chapter from Bibi Netanyahu's book from the 1990s about never negotiate with terrorists? The head of the Mossad going to Qatar, host to Hamas, and negotiating with them. Unthinkable, really. I mean, if Israel had an ounce of self-esteem, they wouldn't do this. I said from the beginning, you have to treat the hostages as if they're dead. If you can find some and save them, that's amazing. If you can find ways to release them, if the Americans can release them, whatever, amazing. You don't negotiate. You don't slow down. You don't repress your efforts to ultimately destroy and wipe out Hamas. Just something to watch. I don't know how substantial this is, but there seemed to be, Saudi Arabia and the Houthis of Yemen cut kind of a ceasefire deal as part of Saudi Arabia's normalization of relations with Iran. Today, supposedly, there were clashes on the Saudi-Yemen border with the Houthis and the Saudis. It'll be really interesting to see if this war reignites, and if this war does reignite, does that change Saudi Arabia's attitude towards Israel or not? It's just something to watch. Nothing more. I don't have a lot to say about that. All right. I think let me just look here and see how we're doing. All right. Let's talk about Iran. So, and I'm happy to take questions about what's going on in Israel, Hamas as well. But let's talk about Iran quickly. So, a couple of pretty. I mean, one is an expected story. One's a pretty stunning story. But anyway, the first, which is another tragedy out of the Middle East, another tragedy out of Iran. I don't know if you saw the story. There's actually video of this circulating on Twitter and elsewhere of a young girl, I think she's 16, I think she was 16, who went onto the subway in Tehran not wearing a hijab and never came out. She was beaten. She was beaten senseless on the subway. She was taken out, on a stretcher. Beaten by men, by the morality police who caught up with her. Much of this was caught, or at least the beginning and end of this were caught on video, and that video is being circulated from cameras in the subway in Tehran. Her name was Amita Garavand. Armita, Armita, Garavand, and she is another victim of the Iranian morality, quote, in quotes, police. Anyway, she was in a coma until yesterday, where they decided to take her off the machines, and she did die yesterday, and the family was notified. The family was not allowed to bury her. My assumption is that they did not want the family to see the body. They did not want to see the family to see the extent to which he was brutalized by the thugs in the so-called morality police. And here you have a regime that legitimizes such stuff, that encourages it. You have the most ugly treatment of women possible on earth. And yet we still see leftist intellectuals, feminist leaders supporting the Iranian regime, supporting Hamas, supporting the activity. Again, just really unthinkable. The horror the women are going through in Iran right now, particularly young women who would like to be free. I mean, there are many reasons to get rid of the Iranian regime, and certainly the American government and the American military force should not get rid of the Iranian regime for the sake of these women. But since we have an interest in getting rid of that regime anyway, why not, hand it over to these women, let them run things. So really horrific. This girl beaten to death, died in a coma, and became another one of the women who have died for the cause of their own liberty, their own freedom. We will see whether her deaths results in the kind of demonstrations that we saw last year, at the end of last year. I hope so. I hope at some point this takes off and becomes a real revolution in Iran. It really does seem like the West will not take care of Iran. Maybe it'll take the women of Iran to take care of the Iranian regime. And one of the horrors of this is just such an inexplicable, that is a word, dimensions of this is, and this is not a joke, because this would be probably out of The Onion, kind of a ridiculous kind of a parody of the world in which we live. But this Thursday, just as the young 16-year-old, just as Amira was lying dead in the hospital, beaten by the Iranian morality police, this Thursday, the Islamic regime in Iran, actually is coming Thursday, so this is after it was announced that she was dead. The Islamic regime in Iran will become the chair of the United Nations Human Rights Council Social Forum. I mean, what do you say about that? Right? Given everything that we've seen and how they treat women over the last year. By the way, the foreign minister of Iran was visiting the United Nations. Isn't it stunning that the United States allows this monster onto American territory and allows him to visit the United Nations in New York City? But in spite of the fact that Iran has public executions with no fair trial, the fact that homosexuality is a crime punishable by death, the fact that the Iranian regime is the leading sponsor of terrorism, the fact that they fund terror and destruction all over the Middle East, the fact that they treat women the way that they do, none of that matters to the United Nations. None of that matters. Iran is now the chair of the United Nations Human Rights Council Social Forum. How can it even be a member of the forum? Human rights? Human rights, the concept means nothing. Zero, zilch. It is eradicated. It is void if Iran is considered a member of a human rights anything. This is a travesty. I think it was, what country was it that suggested that they might leave the United Nations? I see the woman's face, but I can't remember who it was. Anyway, it's a travesty. Every civilized country in the United Nations should boycott the United Nations, should leave the United Nations. The United States should have long time ago sent them packing, kicked them out of New York City. New York City is too good of a city, even in its current state, to host the United Nations. Pack them up, send them to Caracas or to Tehran or somewhere like that. But there is no reason to sanction an organization that does this. Again, we're talking about an Iranian regime that has killed women, that has massacred protesters. There's just no excuse. All right. Just one little anecdote, and then I'll talk a little bit about the conference. I was talking to somebody at an event we did the other night, the debate on the NHS, and he was telling me that his children go to a Jewish school in the north of London. And he said, with everything going on with the Islamists and the demonstrations and everything, the Jews in London are a little worried. And they're worried about their schools and the death threats that are happening. So a few of the parents have gone to the school administration and asked the school administration to have armed security guards at the school. And the school administration has basically said, we'd love to. But there's a law in the UK that private security guards cannot be armed. So basically right now in the UK, you have Jewish schools with unarmed security guards. Now believe me, the Islamists are armed. The horror of what could happen in one of these places. It's just unbelievable. I mean, the cops in London don't even wear arms. Now, more and more of them are, particularly the ones responsible for these kind of demonstrations. But, God, I mean, leaving kids like that unprotected, just a real travesty. All right, so I was at the Alliance for Responsible Citizenship Conference. This is ARC, Alliance for Responsible Citizenship. You get a certain sense of, I don't know, vagueness, if nothing else, from that title. It is a conference organized by Jordan Peterson. He is the founder of the Alliance for Responsible Citizenship, him and some others. Oh yeah, Buzz just reminded me of Buzz online on the chat, just reminded me. There was a story out of Dagestan. Dagestan is one of the not independent republics, one of the dependent republics inside Russia, right? So it's one of the, I don't know if it's in the Caucasus, maybe it is in the Caucasus. Anyway, I think it is in the Caucasus. It is a place with an Islamic population, but it's part of Russia. And I guess a plane from Israel landed there. And demonstrators basically shut down the airport. They broke onto the runway. They surrounded the airplane. And they wanted to go on the airplane and lynch the Israelis and the Jews who were on there. And they basically called. They were basically there calling for the lynching of Jews and anybody on the airplane. Russian police, Russian military had to go in there and get and secure the airport so that I guess the plane could take off, or the passengers could get off the plane. I'm not sure if they wanted to anymore. They probably all wanted to go back home. But that's what's happening in the world. That's how bad things are. Now it's in the Caucasus, yeah. So granted, it's in the Caucasus. Granted, it is in Russia, but still, it's a scary time. Scary, scary time. All right, so Alliance of Responsible Citizenship, as Alexis on the chat says, a pretty Orwellian, well, not so much Orwellian as more as meaningless name. It's a conference of, right-wing influences, people on the right generally. So I was invited because Alex Epstein is one of the speakers. And so I was invited to attend, of course, not to speak. And, I thought I'd go. I was in Europe anyway. I thought I'd go out of interest and see what's going on and what was happening there, try to meet people. One good thing did come of it. I did do an interview with Dave Rubin there, so a short interview, about 20 minutes. That he will put up on his channel at some point, but that was good. It was a fun interview. But anyway, so I was at the conference, and I came a little late, a few minutes late, and the first speaker, and this tells you everything I think you need to know about these kind of. I don't understand what they're trying to do. The first speaker was Kevin McCarthy, the ousted Speaker of the House of Representatives, a Republican. And he gave a standard speech that you'd expect, slamming Washington, slamming politicians, of which he has been a politician for a very long time, in Washington. And he was, it was just disgusting. I couldn't listen to it. I had to walk out because it was so, I mean, we all know who Kevin McCarthy is. This is new. This is a revolution. This is going to change the world, to bring a Republican whose own caucus just ousted as Speaker of the House, who can't get anything done, who has been a complete disaster and a failure. And he gave the keynote speech at the beginning of the conference. And the platitudes and the just a regular standard right-wing BS. So why have an alliance of responsible citizens? Just call it the Republican Party. Now, even if he'd been invited as acting Speaker, well, then it's just a convention of Republicans. And to give him the opening statement, it just doesn't make any sense. This is not an intellectual movement that's out to change things. It's an intellectual movement out to bolster the Republicans. No, we don't need more of that. By the way, Mike Johnson, the new Speaker of the House, who I talked about, the awful, horrible, disgusting religionist who is Speaker of the House now, was also at the conference, although I don't think he was speaking, although he might speak tomorrow or the day after. Then Jordan Peterson came up, and Jordan does what he does. You know, he's a terrible public speaker, but he's brilliant at it. I mean, he's really, really good, but he breaks every law of public speaking. And his talk was a typical Jordan Peterson talk. It was, I don't know, a third stuff you really, really agree with, a third stuff you don't agree with, but he presents it in such a convoluted way. You think you don't agree with it, but you can't actually grab anything. And a third that just doesn't make any sense at all, that is partially non-intelligible. But he got standing ovation, he got cheers and claps in the middle, some for good stuff, some for bad stuff. He brought in religion in a strange way. Yeah, I mean, he's a million times more popular than I am. Well, maybe 100,000 times more popular than I am. No question, right? But yeah, but so is Noam Chomsky. So what? Doesn't make him respect. It doesn't make me respect what he has to say. I don't. It's a mumbo jumbo, and half of it is, you know, the parts that are unintelligible, and the other part was horrible. If he asked to interview me, I would take the interview, of course. Then there was a panel. Anyway, there were only. Oh, I have to tell you about the free market. There was a panel on. There was a talk and a panel on the free market. I said, okay, I want to see what this new alliance for responsible citizenship has to say about the free market. Maybe there's some radicals here. Maybe there's some hope. Maybe they'll move. Anyway, the first speaker was a hedge fund manager. He spoke for a long time, one of the longest speeches in the whole conference. And he started out by saying how much he was a fan of the free market. And that took about 5 minutes. And then the rest of the speech was how the free market has failed and how we need to control it and regulate it, how we have monopoly capitalism. He called it monopoly capitalism. And we need to start giving the Justice Department more power to break up monopolies. We need to break up all the big tech companies. He talked about the financial crisis as if banks were responsible for it. He's a finance guy. You'd think he'd know better. Literally, with friends like this, who the hell needs enemies? Who? I mean, Elizabeth Warren says she's pro-free markets and then goes and trashes the marketplace left and right. So we need now a new group, a new intellectual organization that trashes free markets while claiming to be defending them? All the same garbage, rehashed. There's nothing new. The only new stuff is the emphasis that almost everybody in every panel placed on religion, the emphasis that almost everybody in every panel placed on family, which is code word for religion. They talk about Western civilization, but the only person who gave a sense that she knew anything about what Western civilization was Ayn Rand Ali. I mean, she was like a shining light in a dark place. She was good. She's always good. I mean, almost always. I don't agree with her. But even when I don't agree with her, she's intelligent, she's smart, she's thoughtful, and she's got the right perspective. And basically, she was asked at some point, why did you choose Western civilization over the civilization you grew up with? You know, Hamas, basically. You know, Islamism. And she said, it was really easy. The West represents life. The West is life. The culture that I left represents death. It's a culture of death. Now that is a great condensed summary of the difference. And she said some other things about the Western civilization which were good. So generally, she was quite good. The only other good part of the conference, again, the free market stuff was terrible, 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 terrible. The only other part of the conference that was any good was the energy section. And there was a keynote speak by Schellinger, the guy who ran for governor of California and lost. And then there was a panel with Alex Epstein and oh God, I forget his name. Not nice, not good. He's a guy, Cato, who runs kind of the progress and wrote the book about abundance. Really good guy. God. Anyway, they were excellent, and part of what was good about it is you could see the Challenger and Schellenberger, something like that, was heavily influenced by Alex. So the energy panel is the one part of the entire conference that was radical, progressive in the positive sense, pro-progress. There was positive, there was optimistic, there was exciting, there was new, there was revolutionary. Marion Tupy, T-U-P-Y, thank you, Rob. Marion Tupy is really, really good. I really like him. I had a chat with him before his panel. He's a good guy. We get along really well. Anyway, that was really good. These are real free marketers. These are people who, know what they're talking about. They believe in civilization. Alex actually got a plug in for Ayn Rand in a very important, good way. But that was it. That was the only, and that was the only highlight. That was the real highlight of the conference by far. I mean, Ayn Rand was good, but this was excellent. The rest was disappointing, conventional, not particularly new, and they're not trying to be new, right? They're conservatives, they're traditionalists. It's harkening back to the past, and primarily for them, the past equals religion. His book, by the way, Marion, I can't pronounce it, T-U-P-Y. His book is excellent. It's called Superabundance. It has a good evaluation of how well we've done in the past and a really exciting vision for the future. So thumbs up to Alex. He's doing amazing work. He's having amazing influence. A lot of people at the conference knew who Alex was. I got to meet a bunch of people because I was hanging out with Alex, who came up and said hello to Alex. Also got to meet a lot of people who came up that I didn't know. They came up to me saying they watched the podcast, they listened to a lot of my show. I was promised by somebody that I would be a speaker next time at the Alliance for Responsible Citizenship. We'll see if that ever happens. But a young guy who says he listens to the show regularly. Anyway, interesting. I met expectations. I was a little disappointed, but really, to a large extent, met expectations. So I'm glad I went. I'm not going to go day 2, day 3, but I'm glad I went for one day. And I almost met Dennis Prager, but I decided ultimately Alex was going to introduce me, but it didn't work out. But that's not of great importance to me. I did meet a few people. I met the people from trigonometry. Hopefully they'll have me on one day. And as I said, I did an interview with Dave Rubin. It was pretty good. So I'm looking forward to when he releases that. All right, everybody. that is what I had. I'll remind you that we have the super chat going. I see I've got a bunch of you guys have already given me some good support through stickers. So I will just quickly thank you. Gene, thank you. Whoops, this escapes me. The sticker stuff is hard. All right, Gene, thank you. We'll get to the questions in a second. We'll run through them fast. I don't want to go too long today. Daniel, $100. Really appreciate that. Thanks. Thank you, Daniel. And then I think I saw another $100 somewhere here. Oh, Wes did. Wes, thank you, Wes. Really appreciate the support. All right, let's do that. I can't. Why won't it show? It doesn't show me Wes. Okay. All right, Wes, thank you. So let's see. Let's start with the $50 questions. We have a few of those. We have Michael. Michael says, you said executing prisoners of war is legitimate to achieve victory. What if the enemy started executing our soldiers who have been captured? For instance, in World War II, during the Battle of the Bulge, Germany captured hundreds of thousands of Allied soldiers. Look, I don't think it should be a policy to execute prisoners. I think generally the policy should be not. There's no reason to it. It's gratuitous. It's irrelevant. But look, the enemy is going to do what the enemy is going to do. War is not initiated by people who are going to follow laws. They don't treat people by the law. And indeed, look at the Japanese and how the Japanese abused prisoners of war, tortured them, killed them, starved them. Germans pretended to be more civilized, but even the Germans violated that so-called civilized attitude many times. So the bad guys never follow the rules. I mean, the people who could, gas 6 million Jews, are they really going to hesitate if they want to kill prisoners of war? So they play this game. I don't believe in playing games in war. War is brutality. War is the negation of rules. War is barbaric. And for the good guys to say, well, we're going to do it gentlemanlike, I think is a mistake. Now, again, there's never any reason to gratuitously kill anybody. But I can imagine circumstances where it's legitimate if it's necessary for victory. And by the way, the Germans did kill prisoners of war on many occasions during World War II, even as they pretended to be civilized. Alexis, I just finished Alex's latest book. I see the title starting to turn on that energy, the tide starting to turn on that energy front. Sunak abandoned zero carbon pledge. Do you see it as well? Yeah, I mean, there's no question that as people like Alex, and Alex has influenced a bunch of different intellectuals who are then making the case themselves, as people start realizing that the meaning of zero carbon is a clear decline in quality of life and standard of living. I mean, why did Sunak abandon zero carbon? He abandoned zero carbon not because he changed his mind about zero carbon. He abandoned zero carbon because the UK is in a recession, its economy is doing poorly, and zero carbon, it's completely understood, is going to drive that even faster into decline. And people will not tolerate that, and he cannot get elected if the economy does that. So I think what Alex and others are making clear is that the trade-off that's happening is that you're going to put the country into decline. You're going to put the world into decline, and the poor are the ones who suffer the most. And I think that's become unacceptable politically, at least to some leaders, and you're seeing that have an impact. But I'm seeing more and more of Alex's talking points everywhere. On all kinds of, on Twitter, among intellectuals, but also among politicians. Yes, I think the tide is turning. Look, I think the tide is turning, but I don't think it's going to move backwards. I think it just slows down the progress towards. So we're not going to accelerate towards doom and gloom quite as quickly. I don't think we're reversing course. I just think we're slowing down. All right, Michael says, I don't think Iran is going to be successful in attempts to manipulate the Arab world back into permanent gridlock and hostility with the Western world and Israel. They pulled this stunt with Hamas out of desperation. I mean, that is possible. We will see. We will see what happens. It partially depends on how this all evolves and how it all plays out, how the Saudis respond, how others in the Arab world respond, what Israel does, whether it destroys Hamas or not, whether it lands up being weak or being strong. There's still a potential that Israel does what is necessary. I think the probabilities are low, but it's still possible. All of that will determine what happens. And of course, how does the United States respond? If the Iranians pretty much every single day are attacking American bases in Iraq and Syria. Now, I know people argue we shouldn't be in Iraq and Syria. Sure. Maybe that is a valid claim. It doesn't excuse Iranian, who have no business in Iraq and Syria either, attacking the United States, and the United States is doing nothing. That makes the United States look weak. Iran looks strong, and the stronger Iran looks, the weaker the Americans look, the less likely it is that the Arab world will want to have anything to do with the United States. Alexis says, Yaron, did you see the interview of the son of Hamas founder? The guy has denounced the movement and proposes solutions insanely close to what you suggest. Yes. I mean, this son of Hamas founder has been around for a long time, at least 10 years, maybe longer. I've seen previous interviews with him. He's very good. He gets what Hamas is about. He knows that the only thing to stop them is destruction, that as long as you keep them alive, they will come back. They will find a way to come back, and they are dedicated to extreme violence. They're dedicated to a violent way of life. It's not surprising what he said about this conflict, given that he's been consistent. He wrote a book. I think he wrote a book, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago. If you look up his name and you look for a book about Hamas and what it is, very good, very principled. Ayn Rand says, Rucka Rucka Ali is calling on you to start a Hebrew language channel. It's a great idea, if you ask me. Furthermore, I am of the opinion that Gaza must be deleted. I don't know what deleting Gaza means, but I think it should be destroyed. Should I do a channel in Hebrew? God, I mean, when? And why can't you just put subtitles on my English one? And it would be hard for me to do the show in Hebrew. It would be hard for me to speak off the cuff. Maybe a once a week show, somewhat limited. I could try, maybe. Let me think about it. Anybody want to fund it? Anybody want to support it? If it's guaranteed to be funded in a sense that it would have significant support, monetary support, or maybe if somebody wants to put up some startup money for a show in Hebrew once a week, then let me know. Then I'll definitely consider it. But right now, any new project I do has to be self-funding. It has to be self-supporting. Shazbot says, these atrocities remind me of the Reavers, the hyper-violent monsters from Firefly. Yeah, absolutely. God, real monsters the Reavers were, particularly in the movie, the sequel to the TV series of Firefly. Really, I really loved the movie. I thought it was excellent. Jonathan says, looks like Nikki Haley is surging. That's great. I hadn't seen that, but I hope so. I hope she turns out to be the dominant number two. And I think that if it's just her versus Trump, I think she's got the smarts and the strength to take him on. I mean, I don't know. We'll see. But I am a Nikki Haley fan, so I realize all her weaknesses and all the problems and all the issues. But of all the candidates, she's the one I like the most. Michael says, laid back pedal pusher. One day ago, I never thought a university education was necessary, but now I'm convinced it's downright dangerous. Yeah, I saw that. Yep, there's a lot of danger in American universities these days. Michael says, until objectivism becomes the norm, don't expect much from people. I still expect a lot from people. It's okay. I'm willing to be disappointed. Michael says, will Jews move away from the left given what's happening in Israel? Maybe. I mean, Israeli Jews moved away from the left after the Second Intifada. So to some extent, that happened in the past. It could happen again. Michael says, will you debate Norman Finkelstein over Israel? I bet it would go viral, and his speaking fee is pretty low, and he usually agrees to do debates. I'll have to think about that. I probably would. I'm not an historian like he is. It would be better if there was a historian on my side, but I would definitely consider it. You know, if somebody wants to ask him if he'd be willing to debate me, I'd definitely be willing to. I'd definitely consider it. Michael says, do you think Ayn Rand could have been a genius in physics or mathematics if she wanted to devote her mind to it? I really don't know. I don't know. I don't know how that works. I don't know that, particularly as an adult, I don't think you can just decide. If maybe she was maybe if Ayn Rand had decided on math and physics at the age of 5, she could have been a genius in that, but she didn't. So as an adult, just saying, yeah, I'm going to trash literature and philosophy and go physics, I think that would be too late for her to be a genius at it. Michael says the smallest deed is better than the grandest intention. Okay. Also, Michael says being pro-Israel is a litmus test. For me, if a candidate like Vivek is anti-Israel, I could never support him. I agree. It's not the only litmus test. I have a few of those, but it certainly is one of them. Michael says the world is filled with evil and it likes to spread like a cancer. It is like a cancer. But it's easily destructed by good. Good needs to just stand up to it and face it. This appears to have awakened some of the most ugly anti-Semitic tribalism that has been festering just beneath the surface. Yes. Absolutely, it's awakened that. And again, I expect that on Thursday evening, I will be doing a show on anti-Semitism in the left, probably anti-colonialism, anti-Semitism in the left. We'll talk about what anti-colonialism is, why it has to be anti-Semitic, and how it's applied to Israel, and why it's so vicious and evil. Anti-colonialism being one of the key ideas of the modern left. Philip Weller says, should Germany declare war on Hamas for killing one of its citizens? I mean, Germany, as part of NATO, should declare war on Islamic militants or Islamic totalitarianism, Hamas being one of the many organizations responsible. There have been many terrorist attacks in Germany over the last, since 9/11, many of which, all of which have been committed by Islamists belonging to one faction of the Islamic totalitarian movement or another, whether funded by, whether affiliated with Hamas or Hezbollah or affiliated with ISIS or with Al-Qaeda, all the same to me. And Germany, as part of NATO, should declare war on all of them and seek to work with Israel and the United States to eradicate all of them. We should have done that after 9/11. We didn't. We should do it now. We won't. But this is a battle the entire West should fight. This is a battle NATO should fight. Steven says, Rucka on a daily objective was telling everyone to encourage you to start a daily or weekly show in Hebrew to increase your influence within Israel. So I guess this is you, Steven, encouraging me. I appreciate that. As I said, if somebody wants to fund it, like a show, if somebody will guarantee me you know,
That may be beyond my abilities at the moment.
do you hear that? Siri said it's beyond her abilities to guarantee that show. If somebody's willing to guarantee a certain amount of money per show, then I would definitely consider doing it. Definitely consider doing it. Critical Thinker says, Ukraine, Israel. Has Putin defeated the indecisive West? A few more engineered battlegrounds and exhausted America will retreat. Nothing changed. No, I don't think so. I don't think so yet. Certainly the Ukrainians are not defeated, and they're still fighting. They're making slow progress, but they are making progress. And Russia right now on the battlefield is not making any progress. No, I don't think Putin has exhausted the West yet. But certainly there are forces in the West that might help him to prevail, pro-Putin forces. The new Speaker of the House of Representatives is anti-U.S. helping Ukraine, and I think that is that is a pro-Putin position, and it would be disastrous for America, the West, if that actually happened. All right, guys. Thank you. We'll call it a night. Thank you to all the super chatters. Thank you to everybody. Russia's not going to disappear, but Russia's going to continue its decline. Russia will continue its decline. You know, there are a lot of people online saying, "Ooh, Russia, China, and Iran could defeat the West." I don't know who these people are, but Russia can't beat Ukraine, never mind the West. China has a completely untested military, untested technology, and a lot of upheaval and personnel changes at the very top ranks of its military. So a lot of political machinations. And Iran military is so weak, it couldn't even defeat Iraq in an 8-year war. And we know how well the Iraqi army held up against the U.S. army. So the U.S. could, and particularly with NATO, could easily, and I mean this, easily, take on all three nations. I think the one challenge would be China, partially because of distance, partially because most of that war would be fought by naval forces, and partially because they do have some more advanced technology. But Russia and Iran are non-factors. The only real factor would be China. All right, Silvanos, thank you for the $100. Really, really appreciate the support. One of my left-leaning acquaintances has admitted that what Hamas is doing is wrong, but finds issue with how Israel treats Palestinians. When pressed, they said it would be easier to just nuke the Middle East rather than try to untangle it. Thoughts on his apathy? Yeah, I mean, this is it is immoral and evil to hold that kind of apathy. You're equating the worst kind of evil with, I disagree with Israel too on some of the things that it does. I disagree with, and including how they treat Palestinians. I think they treat them and have treated them in the past too well. I disagree with others. I disagree with the American government. To equate even that with Hamas, it's just moral laziness, mental laziness. You know, it's just evasion, which is the cardinal sin according to Objectivism. So just horrible. I will mention, somebody in the chat is recommended Mearsheimer's talks. Mearsheimer is just a propagandist for the Russians, a propagandist for Putin. He is a worthless intellectual, and is dedicated himself to making sure that Putin gets his voice out there in the West. Somebody actually confronted him. I met him today at Jordan Peterson's conference. I met this guy, an Australian, at the Alliance for Responsible Citizenship. I won't mention his name, but I met this guy. And he said that he was at a talk that Mearsheimer is given in Australia, that the conservatives love him in Australia, or some conservatives. And he was at a talk he gave. And he's listened to a lot of Mearsheimer's talks. And he went up to Mearsheimer afterwards and he said, "I have a question for you." He said, is there, I've listened to a lot of your talks, and I heard your talk today, and my sense is that there's nothing you say that Vladimir Putin would not agree with. And he said, Mearsheimer stopped, looked him in the eye, paused for a long pause and said, yeah, you're right. I mean, he's basically a mouthpiece for Putin, and his ability to actually analyze geopolitics is amateurish at best. So yeah, not a good guy. Don't listen to him. Basically, and so many of his predictions have turned out to be wrong, and so much of his understanding of Russia is non-existent. He has no understanding of Russia, its philosophy, its history, its mentality, and the motivation for the war. It's pedestrian. Pedestrian is a good word. All right, everybody. I will see you all on Thursday. Look forward to being home and doing the shows from home. Thanks for all the support. You've been great. We're like $29 short of our goal, so if somebody wants to jump in, that would be great. But you've been very generous this month, so I really, really appreciate it. And I continue to receive emails of support from you guys, given everything that's going on, and I appreciate that. And so thank you. And I will talk to you all Thursday. Bye, everybody.